Okay, I think we're going to get started. Okay, good evening and welcome. I'm Peter Bonfido, Director of Galleries and Exhibition Programming at the Art Galleries at Austin Community College. This event, which is part of TAG's ongoing series, Artists in Conversation, is a means to reflect on the extraordinary collaboration that the Art Galleries at ACC has had with the artist collective American Roulette. The exhibition, American Roulette, Austin, Navigating Gun Culture in Our Violent Society, is currently on view at Highland Campus, closing June 26. Before beginning the event, I'd like to thank the TAG Gallery team and American Roulette artists, especially Dominic Sansone, Michelle Graves, and Yusuf Devalle, who are joining us for tonight's conversation. I'm also happy to announce that our podcast series featuring these American Roulette artists will be starting next week. A significant part of this project was the inclusion of artworks from ACC community. These artists are ACC students, faculty members, and Austin community artists who submitted work to our open call. We want to thank them for sharing their work. We'd also like to thank the ACC Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, who hosted restorative listening circles on the themes of safety, belonging, and care for others during the course of the exhibition. A special thanks to our gallery visitors who have contributed to the exhibition through submitting their thoughts and ideas to the Reflect and Response wall, and during the many in-gallery discussions that we've had all semester. So the format for tonight will be a brief presentation by Olivia Spires, who leads educational programming at TAG. She will discuss the key elements of visitor engagement during the exhibition run. After that, we'll introduce our featured artists and kick off the discussion with them before opening the Q&A with the audience. So before we do any of that, I'd just like to take a moment to reflect on my own about this project. From a curatorial standpoint, we took a different approach to this exhibition, which stemmed from our conversations with American Roulette's members. The artworks on display are set as focal points for discussion. They are ways of expressing a sense of disbelief or confusion wrought by gun violence, as well as the indescribable realities of loss and trauma. They also address the cultural mixed messages and the social wedges that guns inhabit in everyday American life. The exhibition does not prescribe a course of action. Instead, it advances a challenge, not to ignore an issue that has impacted and shaped all of our lives in uncontrollable ways. With this in mind, the exhibition is not complete until the visitors interact with the artworks and share their experiences and thoughts through this discourse. So again, thank you all for coming. We're really excited about this event and having a really incredible discussion about this important topic. So I'm going to turn it over to Olivia now for her comments.
Hello. As Peter mentioned, my name is Olivia Spires. I manage educational programming at the art galleries at ACC. And as he also mentioned, visitor responses are really just as integral to this exhibition as the artworks themselves. So to give everyone a really round view of the exhibition, we included visitor responses in the slide deck along with exhibition artworks, which will play on a loop throughout the conversation tonight. But a bit more about that reflect and respond wall that these responses come from. Our team wanted to ensure that the space was set up for visitors to engage with artworks, with one another, and also with the bigger topic of gun violence. So we decided to create a response wall, which included very broad prompts that visitors could use if needed, but they could also just share their thoughts and was really as open as possible. And so the response wall is what you see on your screen. And so this wall really had two purposes. Gun violence is a heavy topic, so we wanted to ensure that visitors had an outlet to express their thoughts and hard emotions before they left the gallery. And so for these visitors, the response wall acts as a place for them to anonymously leave thoughts instead of carrying around these emotions throughout their day. And so in shorter terms, it gives a sense of closure to the experience of the exhibition. The second purpose, the wall also allows visitors to engage in dialogue about such a divisive, complicated topic in a low risk and in-person environment. So by being anonymous, visitors can explore their own thoughts about this topic and engage with others more freely. And so we even had visitors kind of replying to each other on this wall through using multiple cards. So it created kind of an interesting asynchronous kind of discussion right there on the gallery wall. And so by the end of May, we had over 150 of these responses left on the wall since the exhibition opened in February. And so we took these responses, coded and categorized them to get an overall picture of how visitors were using the wall and how they were receiving the exhibition content. And so responses, some of which you'll see again in the slideshow, varied from notes of reflection, deep emotion, connection, and calls to action. And so the reflective comments either reference the exhibition, specific artworks, or the broader topic of gun violence. And these reflective comments were in the form of kind of paragraphs to poems or quotes, and also even drawings. The emotional comments ranged from notes of grief, sadness, and anger to validation, hope, and even fear. The surprising factor for us were the notes on connection, which used more unifying language. One example that you'll see later on in the slide is one person responded as, "We all shared the same fear," indicating a realization of shared humanity or even shared mortality in a way through their time through the exhibition. We were also surprised by the various calls to action, which again ranged from expressing a desire for more protection in schools to people calling upon others to pray about this issue. And so these notes told us that people weren't just using the wall for reflective purposes, they were using it to communicate with each other. And so lastly, we also noticed more specific comments that touched on art's role in important social issues. So we categorized these responses that show art as a form of healing, art as a form of expression, and art as a form of protest. And so these comments were a bit different in that they didn't touch on the exhibition itself. Instead, these visitors were looking more at the broader conversation of art's role in societal issues and the bigger social issue of gun violence, which indicated a degree of global thinking, right? Thinking beyond the self and beyond the here and now. If anyone's interested to learn more about visitor responses and kind of the inner workings of visitor research, feel free to ask questions at the end, or you can email us. I'm happy to talk about these things more in depth. But before I turn it over to Peter and our artist, I do want to highlight our staff responses too. I'm going to read a statement written by our gallery monitors, Soleil Parks and Bailey Foreman, about their time working in the American Roulette exhibition. And so to give you an idea of how long our gallery monitors were in the space, it was about 3 days a week for the past 14 weeks. So they spent a lot of time in this exhibition with visitors. And so they write, as a gallery monitor, you are tasked with setting the tone of the space, making visitors feel safe and welcomed. Initially, American Roulette felt like an intimidating environment to do that in, despite the fact that the tag gallery team received conflict training. Gun violence is an intense, deeply personal topic, and I knew we'd be holding space for some difficult conversations. And while those discussions have at times been challenging, they've also reminded me that art can serve as an incredibly effective tool for mediation and connection. I have been impressed with the trust visitors put in our space, telling us about their perspectives and connections to the work. I've also been impressed with the space visitors hold for each other. There's been a remarkable willingness among strangers to listen without judgment. These moments of care between people who may never meet again have been some of the most powerful parts of the exhibition for me. It has really shown how an art gallery can perform as a community space that goes beyond the practice of art itself. Conversations in the gallery have also reminded me of the importance of engaging with difficult topics, even when initiating them can be scary. Each discussion has deepened my and others' engagement with the artworks themselves, always bringing new perspectives and interpretations. Now I look at the works and see the tapestry of experiences I've been presented with throughout the run of this exhibition. So on that note, from our staff, I'll pass the sort of proverbial Zoom spotlight back to Peter and our artist speakers for tonight.
Well, thank you again, Olivia. That was great. And I do want to just mention just the history of this project too, and a special thanks to Yusuf because he's an ACC faculty member, and he's really the reason that this exhibition happened and came to ACC. And so we've been talking about this project for over 2 years, and so I feel that the success of it is really been a community effort here. And so I want to now ask, I'm going to start with Dominic because none of us would be here without Dominic because he really did start the entire American Roulette project. So I'd like to let Dominic introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Dominic Sansoni. I live in the greater Chicagoland area in the far western suburbs. I primarily create very large scale kind of object-based installations, uh, primarily focused on cast objects of various materials. So I don't really work in materials. I like to say I work in ideas. And as Peter mentioned, in a sense, yeah, I'm kind of I guess, the founder of American Roulette. It started off as a solo project that grew out of my personal art practice, and then I started bringing other artists to work with me regarding this important topic and this idea, and we've grown to a pretty core group of 7 people, and it's been quite the interesting journey. And I'd also like to just quickly say thank you very much to the Austin Community Colleges for hosting us and being fantastic hosts and providing such a great space for us.
Thank you so much, Dominic. Michelle, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Michelle Graves. I used to live in Chicago and now I live in Las Vegas. I consider myself an interdisciplinary artist, meaning I don't limit myself to any one medium. And I also have different levels of depth that I go into as far as doing research. But my inspiration for doing research to inspire my work is I'm I'm really interested in how things work and why things happen. So I tend to like do philosophical research, psychology research, even scientific research to understand things from like collecting data about gun violence and what guns are used, which I didn't find much data at all. And that led me to the work that I created for the American, what was for the A Life is a Life, which is the name of my work. And then it can also lead to the depths of like quantum physics and how there's a potential for change at the quantum level. And how I got involved with American Roulette is I made a body of work for an organization in Cleveland, Ohio called Spaces. It's a research art center. And the original work was in a group show called America's Well-Armed Militias. And right after I made that work, I was back in Chicago at a gallery opening. And I know CJ Hungerman, another participant with American Roulette, he introduced me to Dominic. Dominic's like, "What do you do?" And I said, I just made this work. And that's how we connected.
Great. Thank you so much. Yusuf?
Hi, my name is Yusuf Delay. I'm an art faculty here at ACC. I teach three-dimensional design and sculpture, and I am one of the newer members of the American Roulette. So I've been in the roulette, I believe 3, 4 years. Dominic has been 3 years.
Yeah, I
Those were
think
long
3 years now.
Yeah, and Tony and Anthony and I joined together out of Anthony and I met each other in New Mexico at the school I was working at, and Tony had approached me and said, "Hey, I'm really interested in doing some work relating to gun violence. Do you, uh, from some of the conversations we had had, he knew that I was interested as well, and he wanted to form some sort of collective in the Southwest. And coincidentally, at the same time, I had met Dominic, I think, a couple of years prior in Wisconsin
Mhm.
at an iron pour. And I was friends with him on Facebook, and I saw, I think the week prior or the month prior, that American Roulette was having an exhibition, and I got really interested in what they were doing. And when Tony mentioned this to me, I was like, I have a friend that is doing pretty much the same thing. So rather than starting from scratch, what I proposed to him was like, let me talk to him and see if we can join their collective. And rather than starting from scratch, we can maybe grow this to incorporate artists from different parts of the country rather than just regions of the Southwest. And that's sort of what we're doing now. So uh, we have members in Las Vegas, Chicago, now in Texas, Colorado, uh, and Cesar is also in Chicago. So we got 3 members in Chicago. But that's sort of how I came about the roulette, and me and Tony, who is also here with us. But and my work for this body of work really focuses on the emotional state that sort of happens within spaces that undergo extreme violence, such as a mass shooting. I would say that the rest of the work that I do outside of the collective deals also in political or historical events, but not so much in the same vein as I do for the roulette. So the work I do for the roulette is a little more exclusive, um, and in terms of miniature and performance.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think we'll just jump in with the first question for all of you. And so I have a couple questions. Let's start things off, and then we'll open up the Q&A for from the audience. So, in your collective artist statement, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. Your goal is to create a space for nonpartisan discourse on gun violence, which is an issue that unfortunately is ingrained now in American society. So can you just discuss a little bit, like, why is the American Roulette's mission so centered around nonpartisan discourse?
Well, I personally think that partisanship on this issue just causes people to be angry at one another, and it doesn't get anything accomplished. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make anything any better. It doesn't move us forward with finding some sort of solution. So I think avoiding partisan talking points is incredibly important in order to have an open conversation with somebody and get their perspective so that they can see our perspective and we can all maybe start to think a little bit differently. I try to inform myself from lots of different sources regarding this topic, and and my thoughts on firearms have changed and evolved over the years, in a lot of different ways. So I think that's my primary reason why I think it's such an important factor to keep partisanship out of it.
And as we go from city to city, the conversations have been different. Like in Chicago, in the city proper, it was kind of all, if somebody made a comment, then everybody nodded. But then when we brought the work to Las Vegas, the perspective was different. So if we allow the gallery space to be the safe space to have conversations with the different perspectives, then we can learn from one another. It's being a part of American Roulette has 100% changed my perspective on guns in general, and that I think that there's a lack of education. And I only really changed my perspective when I heard a story of a woman who was held at gunpoint here in Las Vegas. She's born and raised, and her father was a police officer, and it's an open carry state here. So she was very familiar with guns, knows how to use them properly. And the fact that she was held at gunpoint, she recognized the gun. And when the police, it was like a standoff situation. And she made the decision to grab the gun, take the bullets out, and throw them away from each other. And then the police were able to get the perpetrator. So, but the reason why she was able to do that is because she has knowledge of the gun. So education is something that came into my perspective just being involved with American Roulette, and the fact that all states are different as far as gun policies go. So if we eliminate the bipartisan aspect, it becomes a safe space for everybody. And we need all perspectives. We can't just have this conversation one-sided. So having, if we make it welcoming for everybody, that, gun advocates, we need the perspective of a gun advocate too.
Yusuf, would you like to comment?
No, I think that really very well summarizes why we're not, why we don't try to alienate up any sort of perspective. So I think that's great. And I think, yeah, like if we did, I think it would just make people not even want to approach the exhibition if it was, if it had a political agenda associated with it, I think.
Right. Michelle, I think getting to know your work, getting to know especially specifically these works in the exhibition, I really applaud you for being able to do that while digging into law. You're digging into these laws, but you're doing it from the standpoint of research, the standpoint of education, and just and knowing. It's about knowing what the laws are and knowing kind of the history of how they came to be. And that should be nonpartisan, just understanding, how things have come to be. So I think that's also a really important aspect of it. And I think that's a difficult space, but I think you do it really well with your approach um, in understanding.
I think fear is a big element of gun violence. And fear is also associated with um, the unknown, like being afraid of the unknown. And so a big point in like wanting to do research, wanting to know why and how, uh, is so I could personally understand. And if one is just ignoring what's going on and not understanding, there it becomes this large fear that's convolutes the situation.
Yeah, and just building off of that idea of fear too in the gallery space, there's also this fear of being judged or rejected by sharing viewpoints, no matter what they are. And so that's something that we're always thinking about, right? When creating an open, welcoming space where people feel like they can share their thoughts. Fear is a big factor in that, and yeah, that's something that we see in this exhibition too, especially with gun violence.
Another
You
example,
definitely, oh,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, please go ahead.
Dominic, were you going to say something?
Nope, just an errant clip.
Oh, uh, another example is we were at in Alamosa in Colorado, and there was another local artist who submitted work, and she painted all female gunslingers, like historically famous female gunslingers. And she approached us at the gallery opening, and she didn't think that she didn't feel like she didn't know if she was if the work was appropriate for the show. But we were like, yes, we need that perspective too, because it's been a part of American culture since the beginning. So it's, that's just another example of like her having the fear to present her perspective amongst other people who have more of a general, so yeah, I just wanted to mention that experience too, because she's glorifying, female gunslingers, which is fine.
Well, I think that's actually, I'd like to ask Dominic to talk a little bit about that because I think his work is very centered on this almost the ideal of the gun and how it's really just carries so much weight, right? And that's why your works and we'll see in the slides, and I think a lot of people are familiar, these oversized guns, right? These larger than overscale guns. And so just talking about that, I think that fits in very much with what Michelle was talking about, this kind of this image that the gun
Mm.
holds.
Yeah, and it's kind of odd how that came about. Like up until the early 20th century, firearms were a tool. They were like any other tool, hammers, saws, farm equipment, whatever. Um, Kind of what started this snowball effect with gun culture, so to speak, in the United States, is the government forced most of the gun manufacturers in the early part of the 20th century to double their manufacturing and inventory because of World War One. As the war closed, the government canceled all those contracts, and that left everybody around the country that was into gun manufacturing, including Tiffany, at one point, oddly, that they had all this inventory and all this extra manufacturing capability, but they had no customer because the government was their big customer. And so they used to deride people that were into guns for the sake of guns, so to speak, as they called them gun cranks. They made fun of those people, but they shifted their marketing towards them, and that became their new consumer base because the government wasn't buying anymore, and they were on the hook with all this extra stuff. Who do we sell to now? Well, the people we used to make fun of. And that's when they really started pushing and promoting through marketing and advertising this idea of the gun as a sense of, or as a symbol for American freedom or exceptionalism or machismo, even. And it's really sort of an odd thing that everybody just kind of fell for a slick ad campaign and bought this bill of goods that wasn't the prevailing attitude 100 years ago. Well, a little more than 100 years ago now, but
Yeah, no, that's those are great insights to have, and to again think about historical context. Think about, um, I think we're at an inflection point, right? We've hit so much. We have so much gun violence in our society. So going back and trying to find out, how we got here is a really important element to all of this. I guess I want to just ask another question about, because we shared all the responses. We had over 150 responses, written responses just in the gallery. And so if we shared those with all the artists, if you guys have any specific responses that surprised you or just made you reflect in a new way, I'd be really interested to hear that.
Well, I guess the quote from Visitor 22 or the response that Olivia was quoting, that I noticed how everyone shares the same fear. I think that one stuck with me the most, but I think it stuck with me because I don't think that's true. I don't think we all have the same fear. I think my fear is different from their fear. I mean, I don't know what their fear is really, but for me, the fear really became that no space was safe anymore. And it really started, for me, I started noticing um, all these mass shootings happening sequentially ever since 2011, I believe, or 2010 or 2011. The Batman shooting in Colorado was the one that really, to me, was like, man, you can't even go to the movies. I remember thinking, like, you can't even go to the movies anymore without fear of something happening, right? And it just kept happening in all these communal spaces that are perceived to be safe. Uh, and it just kind of snowballed from there. The one in Las Vegas at the Country Music Festival. I was just in Las Vegas. Actually, I got to go to the room, or not to the room. That room doesn't exist anymore. But I was on the floor above where the shooting actually took place last month. And yeah, I mean, you could see the full view of where the concert venue was, and it's just like, as an attendee, that's the last fear that you would ever have, is that bullets are going to start raining from a balcony. And then and Walmart, I mean, the school shootings, it's just, for me, that's the fear, is that there's no more safe spaces, right? And and it sort of changes the dynamic for me when I enter a space. It's like I'm scared. I'm looking for exits. Like that's the fear for me. That I'm just sort of conditioned to think that way. So that quote, I mean that I don't know if that's the same fear for everybody, but that's how it is for me. Right. So
Yeah, I think in a lot of our restorative listening circles, we have one actually that was about safety and belonging. And so I think one thing that we noticed through those circles and through the visitor responses is that there is this fear of a lack of safety or a loss of safety in a way. And for some people, guns represent safety, right? And so it's maybe the loss of this object that represents safety to you. But then in some ways, it's a loss of safety because a gun is around. And so it's this kind of fear of being unsafe in a way, which is kind of instilled in us as human beings, right? We have this survival instinct. So our genes are kind of going haywire because of that fear.
Yusuf, could you talk a little bit more about because you recreate spaces and but you take the people out. Could you talk about that? Like how, from an artistic perspective or a practice perspective, what is your art, what is it doing by taking out people from those spaces?
well, I think the absence of the figure is implied because of the scale. And I've done this for a while now with a lot of my sculptures, right? I think from I don't remember, one of my professors uh, talked to me about the absence of the figure and how we can see ourselves in either a space or an object if the proportions are right or if the scale is right. So, like if you have a chair, you can imagine somebody sitting there without somebody having to sit there. So, I think for me, having the removing the people just sort of uh, helps, or it sort of implies that the people could be there, but also the absence of them is, I think, brings about the point that they're not there anymore. So, sort of this loss, but also you can imagine the viewer can imagine the the figure there or the figures there. And I think that's part of why I do try to make things uh, proportional so that they don't look too weird. Because if it's easy to start losing a sense of reality if something's really big and something's really small. So I that's why I try to like mimic these spaces and recreate them proportionally.
Yeah. I think there's also an element that you could, in a way, you could almost imagine yourself in those spaces, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
there's no one else there. You're not kind of witness to other people's activities. This is a space that you might be in. And I mean, who hasn't been in a Walmart, right? Everyone has been in a Walmart at some point and they can, recognize that.
I guess for me, I had never I guess I never saw it like that. I never put myself into those spaces somehow. I mean, for the pieces that I'm working on.
Yeah, interesting.
Interestingly enough, yes. But yes, of course, we've all been at all these communal spaces, right? Multiple times a week, probably. But it's yeah.
Dominic, Michelle, do you have any other reactions to some of the response wall that we got?
Uh, I think the ones that they were kind of validating for me personally that the people going in the space are reacting in a way that I personally hope for. Like in the same connection category, number 30 says part of it says, I see opportunities to connect through these artworks. Unity is needed if we are to survive and thrive. So I think even just uh creating work that's vulnerable and allowing others to go and experience that vulnerability and also maybe associate with that vulnerability themselves, that it does kind of trigger that ornate need for connection, for the conversation for the human connectedness. And I think that especially the way that we present it in a gallery space where artwork in general or art spaces in general allow people to associate however they want, is kind of open to interpretation. So a lot of, from what I didn't read it, I skimmed through it, but from what the tone that I get from it is was validating in a way. Like it's what we're trying to do is happening.
I think the one that really caught my attention the most was comment from visitor 125. And they said, this violence is intentional. It perpetuates death so that rich men continue to build their wealth. We could learn a thing or two from the French. And I feel pretty strongly that gun violence in particular is rooted in poverty and kind of poverty mentality. And not to say that impoverished people are the ones that are committing violence, but a lot of the reasons for gun violence is because of the effects of poverty. It's the despair and the hopelessness, and that can be everything from financial to mental or emotional poverty. So that one really, I think they were almost there with the right comments, and it's not so much that the violence is intentional, but the perpetuating of it is intentional because it does keep the rich and powerful rich and powerful.
I think, yeah, well, you kind of struck on something. Michelle and I were having a conversation earlier this week, and we were talking about guns and violence in general, but how I guess, guns are this amplification of violence. It's like there's violence everywhere. There's violence in lots of countries. There's a part of the human condition um, does go towards violence in certain situations. But the guns are this like almost outsized expression of violence in a way. So I don't know. I'm not sure what to do with that exactly, but that's one of the things that I've kind of thought about in through this exhibition process.
Sure. I
Um,
mean, they certainly make it more easy. It's easier to commit violence with them, but they're not in and of themselves the reason for violence.
There's such a deeper, I see the word trauma right now, so that's kind of my brain wants to use it, but there's such a deeper trauma that needs to be addressed. Like what brings a person to a point that they're gonna have a gun and point it at somebody else with the intention to shoot, and that is not the machine, it's the psychological reasoning that of the person. And that I think is one big thing about at least the way that my brain works is that we need further education. And to touch on the research that went behind the A Life is a Life work, there when I started doing research, the topic I was given was gun violence in schools. So I was like, okay, where do I even start? I was like, well, what are the top 5 guns used in school shootings, and do research on those guns. I couldn't find any information. This is 2018. And what I did find was that there was a Dickey Amendment passed in 1996 that there was a court case between the NRA and the CDC, and the CDC was starting to do research on gun violence, and the NRA read that as gun control. So the NRA sued the CDC, and there's even quotes from both the leader of the NRA at the time and the head of the CDC about the semantics of it. So, but the NRA won that court case, and the CDC was defunded $2.6 million, which, a side note, ended up going to brain trauma research. So in the early 2000s, when we started learning about like football players and concussions and things like that, the only reason why we know about that is because there was a public health research that was funded to research. So imagine if we had the amount of research from 1996 until 2018 for that gun violence research. And the only reason why it started back up in 2018 was that the Parkland, Florida school shooting wasn't the most traumatic school shooting that has happened over the years, but the students got rallied together, and a week after the school shooting, they got 888 schools from around the world to march together on the same day. And that's what got the United States government curious about it again. And the Dickey Amendment is still in place, but the semantics were clarified. The CDC and the NIH and other public health researchers, they're allowed to do research on gun violence, but they have to specifically state this is not about gun control. It's just some of that history there that I think that's, important to understand. Like, if we're educated about things, then we have the knowledge and a little bit more understanding, and that I don't even know what to say about it. Maybe accept. I mean, I don't know about acceptance, but an understanding of how and why.
One thing that's been really interesting with this exhibition, thinking about, school shootings and especially your research, Michelle, and the Dickey Amendment, is that, a lot of our students at Austin Community College are either still in high school or right out of high school, or we have, older students that are second career or retired and non-degree seeking. And so this exhibition has been interesting because it puts all of these experiences in the same room to talk about one issue, which is gun violence. And so specifically talking about school shootings and preparations that active shooter drills that have taken place. It's been really interesting to see students who grew up doing these active shooter drills now learn about the Dickey Amendment, and almost start to realize that it's not exactly normal to have active shooter drills when you're, in grade school. And so it's been a really interesting experience bringing all of these people together, because it's almost like a collective consciousness moment of younger students being face to face with older students who are shocked that this is happening, to younger students, and then younger students being like, oh yeah, it is kind of shocking that it is this realization of being desensitized in a way has been really interesting.
Right, because when are you going to talk about it? Right? When are you going to talk about this? It's not a normal conversation that you really want to have. Maybe people talk about gun violence after the news story that they hear, and then that starts that cycle. But there's also so much emotion when you're seeing these images. It's difficult.
I just want to interject there. Back when American Roulette was just CJ and Cesar and I, it was right after the shooting in Las Vegas, and I was applying to a school in the area, much like your own. And the response I got back was, it's too soon for an exhibition like this. So even when it's right in the aftermath, months, within months, some people just don't want to talk about it.
Well,
That's
I think we,
recently too.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
It's
Michelle.
happened fairly recently too.
Yeah, well, it's happening all the time. I think we're paying, in some ways, paying less attention. Certainly I mean, I remember Columbine very vividly, just hearing about it. That was like an earthquake. And now that's, we're in a different world when we hear about stories than when it was kind of when those types of news stories broke, everyone kind of stopped and couldn't really process it, but they tried to, and they talked about not necessarily what to do, but they all expressed their shock. Now you hear about a mass shooting, and it's just not going to affect you. It's not going to affect you in the same way. It's not going to affect everybody in the same way collectively. I feel.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'll say one last thing about that. I mean, for me, the breaking point for me was the El Paso shooting. I'm from El Paso, and I was in El Paso visiting when the Walmart shooting took place. And no other shooting had affected me like that one. So to me, that one really hit home. And I was sort of in like everybody else, yeah, you hear about them every day and you just kind of become desensitized to them. But that one was different. And I think there were several things that like really affected, like I was physically sick, like hearing all this stuff because I couldn't believe it. And we had just been in the area and my son had just been born. And then I heard reports that, uh, a newborn baby, his parents had died protecting him. Like baby was the same age as my son. There was the guy that was he saw the shooter and he was just going from hallway to hallway or from aisle to aisle just shooting. Actually saw the guy smile at him right before he started shooting at him. Like there was all these things that just made me that one affected me a lot more differently than any other shooting I'd heard from. And that's actually when I had the conversation with Anthony, or when we started talking about it before I joined. And to me, that was like I felt like I need to do something, whatever I can, But it was just so shocking to me that, uh, and it is true that what you hear on TV. It's like you don't really think about it till it happens in your backyard. That is absolutely true. And but yeah, I mean, that kind of woke me up to the desensitization of just hearing about it over and over and over because it does get repetitive and you just put it in the background and you don't think about it. And it's sad that sometimes yeah, you need a wake up call like that. Hmm.
I think we want to turn to our questions in the Q&A. So those of you that would like to ask questions in our audience, we have the Q&A. You have to pop open that window and then you can type your questions in there. I think we have one already,
We do.
Olivia.
Yeah, I can read it aloud. From Carl, we have a question for Michelle. In the Q&A, it says, your piece, A Life for a Life, engages both materially and metaphorically with the absence of data on gun violence, particularly in the wake of policy decisions like the Dickey Amendment. By rendering the moment between violence and death in such a visceral, corporeal way, how do you see your work contributing or complicating the visual discourse around gun violence? And what ethical questions do you hope it raises for viewers?
Good question. So can you read the second to last question again, please?
Yes. How do you see your work contributing to or complicating the visual discourse around gun violence?
Well, I wasn't sure when I made the work. The lack of data, and the lack of my own knowledge on guns in general made me feel the need to shoot a gun. And then I don't know if I'm answering the question, but just my process of how I came up with the work was and I'm really interested in anatomy and physiology. And I without the data, all I could do was imagine that kind of chaos, silent moment. And then like the bullet flying through the air. I mean, in a more, it's very morbid, but that's all I could really think of. And so I for the research part of it too, I felt like I needed to educate myself on guns. I had never shot a gun before this project before. So I went to a shooting range and I the accessibility of guns was actually pretty easy because I was in Chicago at the time. I'm from Indiana. My brother-in-law has 7 household guns. And the only data I could collect was that the typical guns that were used in school shootings were household guns. So I was like, well, these are the common household guns. So as far as like adding to or like the discourse of it, I do think that it's intense. Um, it doesn't need to say anything besides the visceral intensity of it to understand that a life is being taken. It's like the moment that a consciousness ceases to exist. And that to me is how I'm looking at it now is that uh we can use all these symbols, like American symbols, the gun itself, but what about the people? And I think Cesar's work speaks to that too. He does the portraits of people laying on the ground, and you don't know that they've been shot, or you don't know the context of it. We get the context in this collective, but then writing the word bang on top of it, like just that subtle nod towards um, an associative word to gun violence is setting that tone. I don't know if I'm answering the question right. What was the second question?
The second question was, what ethical questions do you hope it raises for viewers?
Ethical questions. Well, I mean, for me, what my hope was to have conversations in the gallery. And so as far as ethics go, it was more so of I needed to be silent and listen, present the work and listen to other people's comments on it. It's brought up a lot of different emotions. The first exhibit in Cleveland, Ohio, a teacher came in and started crying because it was very triggering for him. And that was the first experience that I had had as far as like, um, just the the intensity of how it's going to make anybody react. So ethics, yeah, it's more so like just a capture in the moment of a factual physiological effect of guns on the human flesh. And so it's whatever reactions or associations people take from that we can touch on ethics, but it really becomes the individual opinion on what it means to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing we've touched on in tours too with students is that art is designed to make us feel, right? And most of us have experience with the kind of art that makes us feel joy or safety. And not many of us have experience with the art that makes us feel a bit more visceral or makes us kind of recoil a little bit, makes us feel uncomfortable. And that's exactly what, especially yours and Dominic's work too, to an extent, kind of elicits in people. And it's important in the gallery to talk about that, right? To kind of acknowledge the elephant in the room, that none of us are comfortable looking at this, and that's the point. And once people know that, it's kind of like they kind of get over it. They get over that hump, and they're like, oh, "Okay, I'm supposed to feel this way. It's not just me. It makes sense now." I have another question in the chat from Anonymous. They say, "I know this is the collective's first show in Texas. How did the members feel about that?"
I personally enjoyed it. I had no issues with exhibiting this work in Texas. I I think there's an expectation that sometimes people have this is going to create a lot of bad feelings or pushback from the community, but pretty much everywhere we've gone, when people have met with us and come with us and tried to engage in a more confrontational manner, our approach to it all really, they walk away going, "Oh yeah, okay," and we had a good conversation. So I certainly wasn't worried at all about bringing the show to Texas.
It's almost as
I
if
just
facing a fear, like we don't know what's going to happen. And anxiety and fear only lies in the unknown. So how are we going to know the reactions? We don't know. We don't know how it's going to react. We don't know if it's going to, cause a ruckus and, news, whatever, but
We
our
can
hope
hope.
is, yeah, well, yeah. But yeah, that's our hope is to stir it up a little bit. We still need to have this conversation. It's not over. It's kind of like like you said, we are becoming desensitized to it, but it's still part of our lives that needs to be addressed.
And me personally, I'm really happy that the exhibition came to Texas, and uh, you know, thank I want to thank the gallery for, letting us have the show here. I mean, I think you guys didn't know either what the reaction was going to be or how this would play out or if people would be upset. But I think as far as like me as a member of the collective, I that's the first thing I told Dominic is I want to try to have a show in Texas, if not more. We're still trying to get more. Texas is so big, we're trying to get other shows, and maybe one day we will get other shows in Texas. But it's we are wanting we want to promote the show uh, in all parts of the country, and regardless um, of politics or anything like that. So it's just, yeah, we want to engage in that dialogue with other people, and we're really happy that we got to bring it here.
I will say that I could do without the Dallas to Austin stretch of the highway, but otherwise everything was pretty good.
Dominic is he's our transporter of the artwork. He drove all of our artwork from Chicago to Las Vegas, drove it down to Texas. He's the keeper.
Yeah, it's been almost coast to coast in that van at this point. So we just need a show in Southern California, and we'll have been clear across the country with it.
I think we have time for about one more question. And I have kind of a kind of final question for each of you is, do you have any advice for if there are any artists in the audience that are debating on creating work about gun violence or about hard topics? Do you have any advice to share with them today?
I speak from my personal experience a lot, but I almost didn't take the commission to make the Life is a Life body of work because I didn't feel worthy of making work about gun violence. I'd never been involved before. I'd never shot a gun before. It was explained to me why, and I also got pushback after I made the work. Like I wasn't worthy of displaying that kind of work because I hadn't had personal experience. But as long as one does the research and wants to express an opinion about something, that is the creative freedom that we have. Like there's so much freedom and creativity there, and there's a lot of restrictions that we have these days. So I think as long as one is respectful, as long as one has something they want to say that's productive, I think that you should do whatever you want. Like don't let any hesitation or somebody else's opinion make you hesitate to be creative, because creativity is so essential right now. It always has been too. And I think having the audacity to make work, like the motivation to make work, we can't let anything hinder that.
Yeah, I would echo that too and say uh, I make work about topics that interest me. Like if it doesn't interest me, then I don't want to make it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if I'm not invested in it, there's no like truly invested and interested in wanting to learn and know more about it through, like Michelle is saying, the research. Because once you start reading and looking into things, it starts fueling the work as well. And if but if it's boring to you, I don't think you'll get into it. So don't be afraid to explore topics that are interesting to you.
Or
And
challenging.
I would add, broadly speaking, um, don't let artificial limitations stop you. Um, and like it's easy to get hung up on stuff like Michelle's saying, like someone's trying to make you feel unworthy, or oh, what do I know about this? Well, find out about it. Don't let those things be what stops you from making something that's maybe world changing. So, don't think that your voice isn't just as valid as anybody else's on any given topic, because it can be. And then just kind of more broadly, don't pay show fees. And there's enough exhibitions out there, opportunities that there's no fees attached. Don't pay fees, and remove the emotional attachment. Once you get over rejection, just accept it's a fact of rejection is just a fact of life, and it's not, it's it's not a knock on you. We all get rejected. I mean, I get rejected 9 times out of 10. So, and Mark DeSuvero said the exact same thing. He gets 9 out of 10 times he's rejected for stuff. So it happens to all of us. Remove the emotion. You'll be fine.
Put the emotion in the work.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank all of you. This has been a great conversation. It's been a great exhibition experience for us. And what we really, um, I've learned a lot about just even the nature of art through this exhibition. And I've been doing this for a long time. It's like what you're doing is you're making work that is about opening a door, right? It's opening a door to a conversation. It's not about any of you personally. You're in the work, but you're not, you've put this work out there for this really incredible goal of creating a space where people can address a very difficult topic. And so when I go in that gallery, it's really different than other galleries and different shows that we've done, different, certainly commercial gallery, but even museum spaces where we've been able to make this space a cooperative enterprise for the visitors that come in. We're going to learn from them. Every conversation that I've had has been has just shifted the ideas about this topic in interesting ways, and not like political ideas or policy ideas, just that um, the way that people are affected. And you can see that, and those are very individual experiences. So it's been really extraordinary. And the staff at TAG, we've talked about this. They've all really had very important, meaningful experiences through this project. So really want to thank all of you for being so exceptional and participating with us. And the other artists in the collective, I know a number of them are in the audience. Really thank you all. I think CJ and Tony and maybe Cesar is also here. Um, so thank all of you, and to our audience, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate your comments. We appreciate your investment of time coming tonight, and that we want to keep the door open as well and keep the conversation going. So if you have comments about the exhibition, email them to us. We'll compile them. If you want us to post something in the gallery, you can't make it to the gallery, we'd be happy to do that for the last part of the exhibition. It closes in a few weeks, so June 26th is our closing date. So if you haven't seen the exhibition or you'd like to come back, please come to the gallery. And thank you all again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.